After authorities find bodies buried, they conclude they have a serial killer on the loose.
You really think that one guy could have done all of this?
During the investigation, they uncovered a corrupted cop who they suspect is the killer. In West Mesa in 2009, a dog started digging a ground while he was walking with his owner, Diane. She then saw bones buried underneath and immediately called the police. Authorities soon swarmed the area, uncovering more bodies. As the investigation began, Detective Young started to doubt that a single person could be behind all of these killings. We then see the police raid the home of a man named Felix, catching him handing cash to Cesar just as they burst in, arresting both on the spot. While still at the house, a news broadcast aired Chief Carter's statement. He explained that 6 weeks earlier, a local resident discovered human remains while walking her dog. The investigation revealed 11 women and 1 unborn child, with the remains sent to forensic pathologists for identification and cause of death. After the broadcast, the chief informed detectives Young and Ortega that the mayor wanted the FBI involved, sending a profiler to assist. The detectives picked up Agent Petrovic, who, despite being tired, insisted on heading straight to headquarters. At the station, Petrovic joked that even Young or Ortega could be suspects, before explaining the 4 types of serial killers: power control, hedonistic, and mission-oriented. He believed their suspect was a mission-oriented killer, likely a Hispanic man in his 30s, deeply religious, with a prior arrest for soliciting escorts, and living near the Boneyard. Later, Young observes Ortega on the phone, informing someone that the DNA has been sent in for processing. While it may take some time, Ortega reassures them that they'll soon uncover the truth. The detectives interview an escort who recalls a man threatening her with a gun, demanding intimacy. She grabbed the gun, but it was unloaded, forcing her to flee. She describes the man as a large guy in his 30s, named Caesar, with a tattoo. She also reveals she worked with an undercover officer, Tate, and shares a rumor that one of the pregnant bodies found was carrying Tate's child, implying his involvement. Ortega asks the chief for more information on Tate, who had been suspended for misconduct and faced complaints in 2003. The chief told him they set up a sting using the escort Maria to confront Tate. During the operation, Tate brings up Maria's mother, causing an emotional reaction, and the detectives have to intervene. Ortega questions why Tate is still on the force, but the chief explains there wasn't enough evidence to suspend him and advises Ortega to keep it quiet. Meanwhile, Petrovic continues investigating. In a flashback to 2004, Petrovic is helping his teenage daughter, Sam, change a tire, when suddenly a man opens fire, killing her. Later, Young notices Ortega's absence and calls him. He lies, saying he's out to eat, but in reality, he meets Candy. Initially uninterested, Candy changes her tone when Ortega mentions his missing niece, Selena. Candy reveals her sister, Flaca, also disappeared a month before Selena, but refuses to say any more. Ortega urges her to come to the station, look at photos, and give a statement. As they talk, a car pulls up, and a man kicks a girl out. Ortega tells him to stop, but the man drives away. He reaches a house, screaming and crying. Later, the same man walks into a convenience store, sanitizes his hands, and grabs a drink. The owner calls him by his name, Caesar, and asks if that's all he wants. Caesar then stares at a girl who enters the store. Ortega receives a call from Candy, saying she's ready to talk. When Young asks about the call, Ortega lies, claiming it's a friend. Later, Ortega meets Candy, who is now willing to make a statement about a missing person. She reveals that she, Selena, and Shy went to a hotel, did drugs, and hooked up with men. But Selena was using more heavily. That night, while they were on the block, Selena received a text from Tate. A car arrived, and she left. It was the last time they saw her. Candy accuses Tate of killing all the girls found in the Boneyard. Afterward, Shy overdosed, leaving Candy alone. She tried reaching out to Selena, but never heard back. We then see Selena's body being buried in the Boneyard. The next day, Ortega uncovers 4 missing girls who match the profile of the pregnant victim. And shockingly, their arresting officer was Tate. Ortega presents his findings to Petrovic and the chief, and they are impressed. He reveals that 20 girls who went missing between 1999 and 2000 had arrest records, and 12 of them were arrested by Tate. The chief is shocked by the possibility that a serial killer could be an undercover cop. They could potentially link those 12 cases to Tate's arrests and charge him. But the chief insists on having complete certainty before proceeding. Ortega proposes matching Tate's DNA with the baby of Loretta Garcia, one of the missing girls, to implicate him. On his way back, Petrovic reflects on how Tate fits the profile of the killer they're seeking. We then see a flashback of a teenage girl at an amusement park, whose body is later shown being buried. Carter also recalls a time when he and the police force responded to a scene where young girls were being kidnapped. The next morning, Petrovic and Agent Wack meet with the chief, Young, and Ortega. Petrovic had informed Wack about Tate being the prime suspect, but the FBI has been investigating Tate and determined he isn't the killer. The chief is frustrated that the FBI has been working behind their backs, but Wack explains that in trafficking cases, fewer people involved is better. The FBI had hoped Tate's arrest would lead them to the cartels, but instead, the girls were killed. The FBI offers to help with resources to find the real killer. Despite this, Ortega remains unconvinced and is determined to prove that Tate is the culprit. Afterward, Young confronts Ortega about sidelining her, but Ortega brushes her off and leaves without a proper explanation. Meanwhile, a girl walking alone to the bus station is offered a ride by a stranger, and she accepts. At the narcotics department, Ortega meets with Detective Graham, asking to speak with Tate, claiming he's a potential murder suspect. Graham summons Tate, and during their conversation, Ortega confronts him about his involvement with the girls he arrested and questions his transfer from vice to narcotics. Tate claims the transfer was to stay out of trouble, but Ortega laughs, bluntly revealing that Tate is under investigation. Annoyed, Tate leaves the office. Later that night, Tate gets drunk at a bar and has a flashback to the last time he saw Selena. He tried to coerce her into sleeping with him in exchange for dropping her charges. While Tate is in the restroom, Sergeant Graham shows up and beats him, furious that Tate has become a prime suspect in a murder investigation. Graham, being corrupt himself, fears his own deal with a criminal organization could be jeopardized by Tate's involvement. The next day, Ortega meets with his sister, Nina. Unknown to him, Young has been following him and even takes pictures of their meeting. Inside, Ortega asks Nina if Selena stayed in contact with anyone from their old neighborhood. He learns that Selena had been friends with a girl named Eliza and her boyfriend, Felix. Meanwhile, Agent Wack is focused on her investigation and has narrowed the list of suspects down to a dozen men. Later that night, a black car pulls up at the block and picks up an escort. Moments later, the man is seen choking her in the back seat. As her struggles weaken, he grabs a hammer from the front seat and kills her, then drives to a remote location to bury the body. The next day, Ortega meets with Felix, hoping to uncover more about Selena's disappearance. Felix reveals that Selena had lived with him for a while before he kicked her out, speculating she might have been sold to traffickers. Meanwhile, Young meets with Sergeant Graham, seeking information on the case and Tate's role. She also hints that Ortega is hiding something, and they decide to team up for their own investigation. That night, Graham is overheard on the phone discussing his deal with a criminal organization, promising that their interests are his top priority in exchange for protection for him and his squad. Once again, a black car appears, this time picking up Candy, who is then brutally murdered and buried. The following morning, Graham meets with Ortega, trying to negotiate, but quickly realizes that Ortega is determined to uncover the truth, threatening the safety of Graham and his corrupt squad. Graham later meets with Young and hands her a file containing all the information he has on Ortega. Meanwhile, Petrovic investigates the convenience store owner, who reveals he had seen many of the girls from the Boneyard case. Caesar, a regular customer, had been frequenting the store more often around the time the killing started. Recently, Caesar came by for his usual drink, and the owner noticed him eyeing a teenage girl, who looked visibly uncomfortable and scared. That same day, Young visits Nina's house to dig deeper into what Ortega might be hiding. While Nina makes tea, Young spots a photo of Selena with Ortega. Meanwhile, Graham raids a house and arrests a man named Pablo Ruiz. offering him a reduced sentence in exchange for providing a false testimony that could implicate Tate. Later, the chief confronts Ortega with information from a confidential informant implicating Tate. Ortega, however, suspects Graham is framing Tate to protect himself, but agrees to go along with the narrative to get Tate arrested. Despite Carter's investigation into Tate, no solid evidence is found. Ortega's case against Tate is weak. The DNA test results show that Tate isn't the father of Loretta Garcia's baby. With the evidence flimsy, it's not enough to keep Tate behind bars. Petrovic concludes that the serial killer could be Cesar Malto. Living just a mile from the Mesa burial site, Cesar has worked as a cable installer for 20 years and has a history of arrests for soliciting escorts, though he attends church every Sunday. The FBI has 2 agents watching his house, waiting for any suspicious activity, and plans to interview women who may have interacted with him. Later, Young informs the chief that one of the victims is Ortega's niece. Another of Cesar's victims, Nella, came forward with her story. As an escort, she remembered Cesar because he was different, tense, and distracted. He told her his mother had recently died and muttered about God's grace helping him stop sinning. Then he began choking her, but Tate happened to be nearby and saved her. One night, Cesar killed a woman and was moving her body from his house to his car, planning to dispose of it. At the same time, Ortega was following Tate, hoping to catch him in something illegal. He saw Tate with an escort. When Tate noticed he was being followed, he fled, leading Ortega to chase him. The chase ended with Ortega crashing into Tate's car. Bleeding, Tate was held at gunpoint by Ortega and confessed that he didn't kill Selena. He had dropped her off at the block before another person picked her up. Meanwhile, the FBI agents arrested Cesar and found evidence linking him to several murders. Separately, Ortega met with the chief and revealed Tate's confession that Sergeant Graham was a corrupt cop who forced witnesses to lie and abused his power. Graham was subsequently arrested by Ortega. Back at headquarters, Petrovic shared that Cesar claimed the dead girl in his car was the result of an accident. While Petrovic believed Cesar was a killer, he wasn't the one they had been searching for all along. Later, Ortega, at his sister's house, received a call informing him that more dead bodies had been found in the desert. Though he had been taken off the case, they wanted him to come. The movie ends unresolved, with the real killer still unidentified. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.